All right, everyone, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. My name is Chris, and I am host for the Lunchtime Discovery Series here inside the SECU Daily Planet Theater. Thank you for joining us, whether you're here in person or online. If you want to join us online next time, check in with us after the show. We'll give you the link. You can also go back and watch the archive from this program for the last several months back. There's a great archive of stuff. But the Lunchtime Discovery Series is brought to you by the North Carolina Office of Environmental Education and us here at the Museum of Natural Sciences. We work together to bring in local experts who are passionate about science and nature and education, bring them into this space and learn a little bit about what they know a lot about, and then learn what's happening in our own backyards and how it applies to us, our daily lives. And for this series in particular, we have lots of professionals in these fields who join us. So how does that apply to the work that we're doing here in the Triangle every single day, and even across the state of North Carolina? Today, our guest is Sandy Schweitzer. She's the executive director of the Triangle Land Conservancy. We're going to learn about their work here in the Triangle, and in particular, the ways that they are expanding, it sounds like, growing the space. And one thing that I love is that North Carolina has such a passionate and dedicated network of parks and green spaces and trails and preserves. And right here in the Triangle, we're sort of like a hot spot for it. Like me coming from where I grew up in Tennessee, I wouldn't have said that we had such an incredible network. I'm sure it's there. I don't want to disparage Tennesseans. But we have an amazing network here in North Carolina of green places and access to those things as the public. So Triangle Land Conservancy is at the forefront of it, so I'm excited to learn more. Please put your hands together for Sandy Schweitzer.
Thank you. I know that some of you were really looking forward to seeing my colleague Deja Smith with me today. Unfortunately, she had a family emergency, so it's just me. She is, if you know her, a lot more fun than I am. So I'll do my best. I also wanted to encourage you, if you have any questions while I'm talking, just raise your hand and I'm happy to stop and answer a specific question. I don't like lecturing. I don't like being the one person up here, so we'll just see how it goes. So TLC's mission is to create a healthier, more vibrant Triangle. As he said, safeguarding clean water, protecting natural habitats, supporting local farms and food, and connecting people with nature. And we do this through land protection and stewardship, catalyzing community action and collaboration. So you'll hear me talking a lot throughout this talk about partners that we work with. We don't do this alone. We do it very much with other people and other organizations. So since 1983, we have helped to permanently conserve just over 20,000 acres of land, which is a little bit over 142 miles of stream. A lot of our work, as I mentioned before, is to safeguard clean water. This map shows the Triangle, the 6 counties that we work in, and the shaded green areas are our priority areas. They are not necessarily, we haven't protected everything in those areas by any stretch of the imagination. I think one of the more interesting parts of this for you, although I'm not going to be talking a lot about it today, is that the city of Raleigh charges a 15 cents per 1,000 gallons of water used to protect the watershed. Because they know how important that is and how much more affordable it is to keep the water clean going in as opposed to having to clean it up later. So that northern part on here where it says Upper Neuse Clean Water Initiative is funded by the city of Raleigh, all the work that we do up there. So it's interesting, people in Wake County sometimes complain that we don't have enough preserves in Wake County, but Horton Grove and Brumley Forest, the Little River Regional Park, those are preserves that were protected thanks to City of Raleigh, and they help keep your water clean. So you can see our preserves around the region. We do have 7 preserves that are open to the public right now, plus Irvin Farm, which is a working farm that's used by several hundred children and refugee farmers every year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But in April, we're going to be opening our 8th public preserve, the Bailey and Sarah Williamson Farm Preserve at Walnut Hill, which is on the far right corner there in that Marks Creek area. I want to highlight just a little bit, again, what we do land protection for. As a lot of times people think about conservation as keeping the land from people, but we really see ourselves as doing benefits for the community, the clean water, connecting people to nature, supporting local farms and food, and protecting natural habitats. And it's pretty cool, in my opinion, that the Bailey and Sarah Williamson Preserve encompasses all 4 of these benefits. So in 2018, TLC set a goal of conserving 25,000 acres by 2025. I mentioned that we are just over 20,000 acres protected. I'm really proud of our team because we set this goal, and I thought it would take us a couple years to get to the point that we were protecting 1,000 acres per year. A lot of it involves funding that we have to put in place. But we were able to surpass that in our first year. So we went from a little over 18,000 to 20,000 in 2020, which is way more than I thought we were going to be able to do the first year. So how do we do land conservation? The first thing is that we do it through conservation easements. So a little over a third of what we protected is conservation easements. And we also do it through land acquisition, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Sorry. Forgive me, because I wasn't planning to do the whole presentation until yesterday. So the way we do conservation easements is that a landowner either donates the development rights off the top of the property, or we are able to purchase it through funding, for example, from the city of Raleigh. Funding makes that possible. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Mapleview Farm outside Chapel Hill. TLC holds 3 easements on the property, and we're working to complete a final one. And what it means when a farmer in particular puts their land under a conservation easement is that the property will be permanently protected. It can only ever be a farm or forest. And that means no subdivision, usually there are 1 or 2 building envelopes, but no impermeable surfaces added to it. And normally there are, we put into place best practices in terms of particularly keeping farmers, animals out of the watershed, which is something that we don't really want in our drinking water. The conservation easement goes with the property. So if it is handed down through generations or if it's sold, the easement stays with it. And TLC has to then monitor the easement, look at the boundary lines, make sure they're doing everything every year. So we have 1 staff person who is entirely devoted to doing that. And then when we have properties, for example, at Brumley Preserve, have any of you been to Brumley Preserve? So TLC owns that property, but the Neuse River Association actually holds the easement, and they come out and monitor it. So we kind of keep an eye on each other as we go, and we do that also with governments. I'll talk a little bit more about that. A lot of our farmland protection is in Johnston and Chatham counties. We just protected, part of the reason we were able to go over our goal the first year was that we protected 1,100 acre property in Johnston County. It's not an easement, but it's a lot of farmland, and some of it is forestry land. So we're going to be opening our 8th preserve in April on the 25th, Bailey and Sarah Williamson. And as I said, it protects all 4 of the public benefits, but the other thing is that it's really about collaboration in that area in particular. We've worked very closely with Wake County since 1998 in this Marks Creek area. You can see all the green space that has been protected either by TLC or Wake County, or both. For example, when I'll go into Williamson Preserve in a little bit. But this is an example of what we're doing, and the goal is to have, you can sort of see the line that goes down the middle, that's the Neuse River, and so our goal is to have a connection all the way from the Neuse up to the very top by 64. And we're getting pretty close. This preserve certainly is helping with that. I don't know how many of you have been to Turnip Seed Preserve. You can see that on there. It's open to the public now. And we're working on some other projects out there. As you know, Wake County passed a bond referendum for open space and trails, and so TLC submitted 10 applications for $7.6 million of the $7 million that Wake County has available. And I know other organizations did too. So those won't all get funded, but we are constantly looking for properties to protect. And that kind of funding allows us to do it. So the Bailey Insular Williamson Preserve is a gorgeous 400-acre property in eastern Wake County, as I said. As I start to tell this story, I want to be really clear that TLC thinks a lot about the fact that the history of land ownership and land loss in this country is really steeped in blood and not great all the way through. And so we think about all the peoples who lived and worked on the lands that we have protected, and that is an important part of the story for us. As you may know, the first people settled in North Carolina more than 12,000 years ago. And we are really grateful for the stewardship that they did of the land. And so it's easy to talk about land ownership in just starting from when Europeans got the land. So in this case, the king gave a land grant to Thomas Mile in 1775. But I think we all know where that land came from, which was, it was taken from the native people. In 1830, records show that Alonzo Mile inherited 1,300 acres. Of the 400, it grew to 1,300 acres and 33 enslaved people. And by the Civil War, the plantation had grown to 3,000 acres in that area, and there were at least 33 enslaved people on the property. We don't have all of the records, but we know at least of those. Over the years, the plantation was divided among Alonzo's children, and in 1879, his daughter married Bailey P. Williamson, and the land was, over the years, divided among their children and grandchildren. And 405 acres was eventually given to Bailey Williamson, Captain Williamson and Ella's grandson. And some of his property was also, some of that whole plantation was also obviously sold to other people. And some of it, after the Civil War, was also given to and sold to descendants of the enslaved people who had worked on the property. In 2013, Bailey and Sarah Williamson's daughters, Sally Greaser and Betty Brant Williamson, sold the farm to TLC at a bargain price. So this is probably the most common way that we protect land, is that a landowner says, okay, I want to sell my land, I'm willing to give you a discount, they get a tax deduction, and then we have to go out and find the rest of the money. So in this case, we got money from the state's Clean Water Management Trust Fund, because it does protect the watershed leading into the Neuse River. We got money from the state's Environmental Enhancement Grant Program, from both Wake and Johnston counties, and from some private donors. So we were going to next look at a video, but that didn't work, so we're just going to skip right over that part. And so once we purchase the property, one of the things we do is a baseline documentation of any property that we own or put an easement on. So we go out and see what's out there and determine what would be a long-term plan for it. So we knew we wanted to open this property to the public. And we also knew that unlike most of our properties, we wanted to keep it in farmland. Community has a really rich farming heritage, and we wanted to support those local farmers, but also support the local food system. And so it took us a while. I'm not the most patient person. I think if someone had told me it was going to take 6 years. We bought it in December of 2013. But if somebody told me it was going to take this long till we opened, I might have gotten more upset. But anyway. So in this map, you can see the preserve itself is the red outline part. The green squiggly line running through the middle of it are hiking and mountain biking trails that we're putting in right now. And you'll see that it then goes down into this yellow sort of leg off the bottom. That property is owned by the state. It's managed by the town of Clayton, and TLC is going to be building the trails on it. So together, this will be about 630 acres of open space primarily, and there will be around 12 miles of hiking and mountain biking trails. The trails tie into the Clayton Greenway, the Mountains to Sea Trail, and the Neuse River Greenway along the southern edge. That line, that white line at the bottom, is the Neuse River Greenway. So it's a pretty exciting piece of connectivity, and the trails are really beautiful. I will tell you right now, they've started, and I'm just thrilled about them. So as I mentioned, the property protects for all 4 of the public benefits of conservation, and clean water is a really important one of those. There are 2 ponds on the property in addition to the creeks that I mentioned. It's also part of our goal of supporting local farms and food, and normally that looks like a conservation easement on the property. As I said, in this case, it includes about 130 acres of farmland that we are going to keep in farming. Again, I'm going to talk about partnerships. Wake County passed a food security plan about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 now. And one of the 3 initiatives that they wanted to launch to get that going was what they're calling a next-gen farming initiative. And so we have a contract with the county to implement that. And what that looks like is we're trying to get young and beginning farmers land so they can come, and we set up long-term agreements with them so that they can work on the property and not have to have the capital. It's not an incubator farm program. We don't really have the capacity to support that, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other farmers out there. We are using regenerative farming practices out there. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it really is about not just taking care of the soil, but really putting carbon back into the soil. And so that's one of the, this is clover, which in addition to being beautiful is really great for renourishing the soil. And forests are also really important carbon sinks that filter the water and are important to the whole system. So with regenerative farming practices, local farmers are building climate resiliency, but also sometimes, and in this case, growing really yummy beef for us to eat. Jake Newbold is our first farmer out there. So we have a farm manager who's working with him, and he's also working, again, with another partner, the Center for Environmental Farming Systems. So he's got 8 head of cows, and he's going to be using a rotational grazing system, which instead of degrading the soils, improves them. And so instead of planting a whole bunch of grasses for the cattle to eat and then having them come in and kind of destroy it and starting over, they will be rotating around. So they'll be eating the grass and pooping, and then they're going to go to another part and do the same thing while that gets rebuilt. So it's a pretty exciting system, and we are hoping we will be doing educational programs at the property on regenerative farming practices. One of the things that we have done on other properties, I mentioned Urban Farm, which is a property in Orange County that has 2 nonprofits on it, and one of them is Transplanting Traditions Community Farm. And they work with Burmese refugees, Karen refugees from Burma, who are now, they started a 1-acre community garden, and now they're up to almost 10 acres. They have chickens, they have 31 families have plots out there. They grow for themselves, but also they sell at the Carver Farmers Market. They sell to local restaurants. And they also have a CSA that's almost always sold out. And it's really cool because they not only grow crops that we're familiar with, but they grow crops that they are familiar with. So if you're interested in farming or gardening, I really encourage you to go out and see it sort of midsummer. It's spectacular. So it's a great partnership for us because they get land at a pretty low sort of symbolic amount that they pay, but it's a long-term agreement, so they know that they can be there for years and years. And they put, as you know, farmers, one of the most important things that they do is build up the soil. And so knowing that they're going to be able to be there and enjoy that is important. So at the property, we're back at Williamson Preserve, we are trying to use and reuse materials. So this was an old barn, a pack house, and no insulation, not in great shape. You can see it sort of, well, it's not listing as much as it looks like it is here, but it was, I thought, precariously balanced on its little foundation. So we got a grant from G&D Ammons Foundation and the Cannon Foundation and have completely renovated it. It's going to be office space for our staff and for the farmers. And the entryway on the right in this picture, you can see it better, will go into the preserve, and there'll be history of the property and farming on the land will be outlined there. So another of the benefits of conservation is protecting natural habitats. And some of you probably know that North Carolina has a natural heritage program that defines natural areas as land or water that's important for the conservation of the natural biodiversity of the state. And since 1983, when TLC started, we've protected almost 10,000 acres of designated natural areas. At Williamson Preserve in particular, citizen scientists have discovered hundreds of species of plants, animals, reptiles, and amphibians. At Brumley, almost 50 different species of odonates, like this dragonfly, have been identified. And I'm referring to Brumley because that was the last preserve that we opened to the public, and I think some of the restoration work we've done there has been sort of interesting. Before we opened, we thinned about 30 acres of mostly loblolly pine monoculture, and in its place, we've planted over 3,000 oak, hickory, shortleaf pine, black gum, dogwood, and redwood trees. And this will provide a much better habitat for wildlife. Another thing that we did was, I don't know if you remember a few years back, we had this pretty intense acorn year where there were just acorns fell from every tree. I don't know what happened, but anyway, we had volunteers collect about 3,000 of them, and they planted them. And so we figure even if 10% of them survive and we've fed all the squirrels, that was a pretty great way to go. So some of them are starting to sprout. It's kind of cool to see. At Williamson Preserve, there's Deja. At Williamson Preserve, we're planting and nurturing a longleaf pine forest. You all probably know that longleaf pine used to cover almost the entire Piedmont and eastern part of the state. And the biodiversity that they support is almost as rich as the Amazon. So it's not the pine trees that we see growing around looking like weeds. These are longleaf pine savannas are really pretty spectacular. So we're working hard on these poor little guys. I mean, we planted them, they just look like little stalks of grass, and then the summer came and we had drought and we had floods and weeds grew up, and so we're really excited that everything has died back and we can start to see them out there, and we'll be doing burning and other things to help regenerate those. So there's also going to be a video there. Another way that we are going to be able to protect 25,000 acres by 2025 is to help people develop a love of the outdoors. So Brumley Preserve, which is the last one that we opened, we expected at the grand opening that we would have a few hundred people. We had 1,300 people showed up over the course of the day. We almost died. We did run out of food, but not beer. So we're a little more prepared for opening Williamson Preserve in April. And today, more than 2,000 people a month use Brumley Preserve, which is our most used preserve and is kind of astonishing. It's our first preserve that had mountain biking trails. There's some controversy on that, but we are going to have mountain biking trails again at Williamson. One of the other things that we do at Williamson, and have been since, I mean, we haven't opened yet, so we've been doing it for a while, is Knightdale High School is less than 5 miles away, and they have been bringing out classes of students to explore and do hands-on science education. They've done art projects out there. So it's been a really great way to engage the community, so we're going to continue that program. We also offer regular work days at all of our preserves. You'll see some of these are some of the pictures. So we have every Thursday morning we have a group that comes out and volunteers at they will be assigned to any one of our preserves. They're kind of regular folks. We have Walnut Wednesdays at Williamson Preserve. At least one Saturday every month we have a work day. So if you're interested in getting out and getting dirty, we are doing trail building now. So I'll give you our web address at the end. You can sign up and go out to help at Williamson if you're interested. We also offer guided hikes, and again, those are all listed on our website. I wanted to give a pitch for our upcoming next event, which is going to be here, Wild Ideas for Farms and Forests. If you haven't been to these programs before, they're a lot of fun. We have 4 or 5 speakers, and they each get only 15 slides and 5 minutes to talk. So it's kind of a race, and it's really fun to see how different people handle that. I do especially poorly at that kind of format. But the topic is farms and forests, and we're going to be talking a lot about climate change and regenerative farming, both at Walnut Hill and at other preserves and other organizations. So speakers will include and we're also going to be talking about the bike trails. So we'll have someone from East Coast Greenways. Van from Brewery Vivana is going to be talking about the connection between place and soil and food that's on your table, and a couple other people. And then there's also, by the way, free food and beer. So it's a lot of fun, so I invite you to come out to that. We are going to be opening the Williamson Preserve on April 25th. Over the next few months, we're going to be promoting in more detail what's going to be happening, but we'll have guided walks, we'll have bike rides. I believe there's going to be yoga, we're going to have food trucks, beer, of course. Not beer also. We'll have kids programs. So it should be a lot of fun. I really want to encourage you to come out for that. In closing, I just want to say I hope that you'll join us, whether it's coming to an event, going on a hike, just enjoying our preserves, of course, becoming a member, and talking about our work, because I think that a lot of people love the quality of life that we have in the Triangle, and part of that is that we do have this amazing connection of open space. Here are the ways that you can connect with us. We're all over social media and promote our events there. So that is my presentation, and I would love to answer any questions that you have about programs. I skimmed over a lot of things that we do, but would be happy to tell you more about any one of them.
Thank you very much. Let's give Sandy a round of applause. And let's take questions. So if you got something you want to know more about, wave at me. I'll bring you a microphone if you're down here on the first floor. If you're up on the balconies, just wave down at me, and you can yell at us.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
We'll repeat questions as we get them.
What are the hours on the 25th?
Good question. It's going to be, I think, from 9 a.m. to pretty late into the evening. We were selected to be a star party location that day. So there will be stargazing in the evening. So it'll be open all day, and different things will be happening. You can come the whole time or just part of it. All our preserves are currently open from dawn to dusk. Our mountain biking trails are closed if it rains, but other than that, they're open.
Are dogs permitted?
Oh, yes. Dogs are welcome on our properties. Thank you for asking. Dogs on leashes. And clean up after them, yes. And because we are a small nonprofit and not a state park, we also don't have trash containers at our preserves, so we ask that you take it with you when you go. at Brumley and also at Walnut Hill, we do have bathrooms available.
What's the plan for the other buildings on the Williamson?
Good question. Did you see the other buildings? So there's a beautiful barn that has just been stabilized, and that will be used by a farmer, we hope. There are two pretty rundown sheds not far from the pack house that are still have some of the previous owners' stuff in them, so those will get cleaned out. Again, those will be used by farmers. And then there's a barn on the property farther down that will be renovated as needed for a farmer. So right now, Jake is our only farmer on the property, but we've had several others who are in the process of kind of being interviewed and seeing about what they need. We are a nonprofit. We do not have unlimited capacity, and so any improvements that we do involve us writing a grant, whether it's to not a foundation, a company, or a government entity. So. And we have dreams of other kinds of buildings on the property someday.
You differentiated earlier between biking trails and then mountain biking trails. Are we talking about the cinder path versus a single track?
Oh, great question. Ours are only single track. We don't, they're hardened dirt trails. They're mountain biking trails.
So the map you showed us earlier that were walking and biking trails, that is a single track path or more similar to turnip seed? That's what I'm familiar with.
No, they're not as nice as turnip seed. No, they're wide paths through the woods, but it's for mountain biking primarily. And we work pretty closely with Torque, the Triangle Off-Road Cyclist, help with the trail building. And so there, I'm sure we'll be over in some corners, some little jumps and stuff. But the trails will be, at Brumley right now, we don't have directional trails, but this is one of the things we're gonna do at Walnut Hill. There will be loops, and so we'll be encouraging people to, we haven't quite finalized whether it's gonna be daily or weekly or monthly, but they'll be going a single direction each day because it just gets a little too wild out there. Another reason your dogs need to be on a leash.
Have you picked the crops that you're gonna prefer, or is that up to the farmer?
It's up to the farmer. We would love to get, one of the things that we're really looking for is somebody who would like to have a native plant nursery out there. There's a lot of demand for that, and it would be great. I know that we're gonna do some permaculture, so there'll be some trees that we'll plant in some of the areas. We have a pretty detailed plan for the farming part of the property based on soil types and drainage and that sort of thing. So as farmers come and are being recruited, it's, you know, looking at what we have and how that fits with their needs.
It looks like you've really worked with a lot of different organizations to prepare and open Williamson Preserve. What does TLC look for in a partner or a collaborator?
Somebody who wants to get people outside. We have so many different groups that we work with. So everything from, well, at Brumley is a great example. Schoolhouse of Wonder is a summer camp and year-round camp, and they just go stomp around in the woods. At our Irvin Farm, where Transplanting Tradition is, there's a group called Learning Outside, and it's a year-round outdoor kindergarten that is on the property, and they have maybe 10 acres that is sort of their school. Their indoor space is a teepee. I mean, it's rugged, but then they stomp around in the woods. We work with groups like Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers Big Sisters, East Durham Children's Initiative, who work with kids who are generally don't get to go outside, and so we'll do some education in the classroom, but then also get them out to our preserve. So a lot of times it's, you know, we bring buses, you know, so that they can get out. So we love working with all different groups, and part of it is in case I didn't mention enough times, we're a nonprofit, and so we don't have the capacity. We have 2 AmeriCorps members who do environmental education. They do a great job, but we don't have like a full-time year-round staff who runs that. And with the farming, we also are looking for partners who are going to do their own work on our property. We want to activate the property. Oh, we have another group, I didn't even mention this, called You Can. that is on a property that we own north of Durham. It's not open to the public, and we don't really intend to open it, but it used to be a farm, and so they were looking for farmland, so they've gone in and they have done amazing work with, that's somebody else who's going to be at Wild Ideas. Delphine's going to talk about what they've done, but they have taken these just totally rundown buildings and not great soil and turned it into a really cool education and farm project. So.
The Next Gen project that you mentioned, is that a Wake County program?
Sort of. It's funded by Wake County. When they were looking at their food security plan, I don't know if you're familiar with that, it's a pretty big document. It has it had, I think, maybe 40 initiatives that would help support the food system. And so the county commissioner said, okay, well, give us 3 that we can do right away. And so the staff recommended, among others, TLC's work at Walnut Hill and getting some farmers on the property. So that's been so they're funding part of the staff position and some of the infrastructure improvements. It's a 3-year contract. And then they also funded Passage Home, if y'all know them. They do economic development around gardening and food. So.
I noticed that the family held on to the parcel that the old church is on out there. Is there a plan to preserve that, or do you know if there's any plans for that?
Yeah, so actually TLC didn't want that church at the time. We just did not have the capacity to manage it. It was getting vandalized a lot, and it needs a lot of work to be, I mean, it's a beautiful church. You can see it in some picture. In one of the pictures, and it's pretty iconic because it's on the northern side of the property, and it's just sort of cut out like this. So when you go, you'll see it, but we don't own that. It doesn't have any, no insulation, no power, no water, and I think she had to put in a new roof since we bought the property. We have been talking to her about that part of the property, and then across the road there's a triangle of, I don't know, 35 acres farmland that we would love to also protect, and we've asked for money from the county, and she'd be willing to do donated value. But at the time, TLC really just didn't have the capacity. And there are a couple other buildings on the property that we also didn't get and didn't want at the time, but we might get. So it's always a trick when you're getting open space, that a lot of times open space comes with houses, and that isn't always a great thing. Bromley actually has a house on it, and there's a caretaker who lives there. So I think we're getting close to our time. Well, maybe not.
Yes, how do you come up with your master plans for the properties that y'all acquire?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we do a ton of planning, and let's see if I can do this without totally embarrassing myself. So if you look at this map, these priority areas some of them are defined, primarily the Upper Neuse is defined by funding, but the New Hope Creek corridor, we've done a lot of work with partner organizations, River Association and a couple, Audubon, a couple others, to develop a plan for prioritizing protection along there. We've just completed, I think there's some information in the back, a Jordan Lake Watershed Protection Program, which is similar to the Unkwe program, that will go around Jordan Lake and then up the Haw River. And so that has been an amazing collaboration with, I think there's 13 municipalities and other nonprofits who are doing work in that area. I'm sure you know that the Jordan Lake rules never really got fully implemented. There were a lot of regulations, and there was a lot of sort of competition. And so a couple years ago, we started working with the Triangle J Council of Governments to bring together the users of the water and also the people upstream to talk about what would be some non-regulatory solutions. And so the Unkwe model is one that they're looking at. So we're hoping that the town of Cary, well, right now the town of Cary, Apex, Morrisville are looking at implementing some sort of user fees. So in each of those areas, we do a parcel by parcel analysis of the nutrient loading that would be avoided if a particular piece was protected. And then we've also done overlays in this whole area, prime soils, which is also connected to, we did a whole analysis on climate resilient properties, and so that is an overlay that we do. So anytime anyone calls someone on our staff and has a property, they can pretty much know whether it's a priority for us, whether there would be funding for it. We have not done a lot of work, for example, in Lee County because we don't have any funding to do that. So if we have a landowner who wants to donate, even if they want to donate a parcel to us, we have to find funding for all the acquisition fees, right? So appraisals, surveys, attorney fees, closing costs, all that kind of stuff. And usually if they're donating land, they don't want to donate that too, quite fairly. So anyway, we look for funding for that. Did I answer your question? Oh. Great question. So,
Can you repeat the question?
oh, sorry. The question was, for a specific parcel, how do we develop a plan? And so that comes from these other plans inform it. The clean water easement boundaries, that kind of thing informs a lot of it. Whether or not we want to or have capacity to open it to the public, build trails, that kind of thing. In that case, we hired a group out of Massachusetts that does a lot of regenerative farming and design. They're called the Regenerative Design Group, and they came in and spent about 6 months analyzing the soil types and the drainage and looking at what was where, and then from that they made recommendations about what kinds of farming we could do in different sections. And it became clear that this one part of the property has soil that we think might work for the longleaf. It might be a complete bomb, but we're going to try.
So I've got the last one. If folks wanted to do a sort of deep dive into these management or master plans and how TLC makes decisions, how can they do that?
Great question. Well, go to our website, and there's a section, I believe it's called Conservation Planning or something like that, and it goes into each of these different plans that we have in great detail. You can dive in pretty far. If you're interested in volunteering, we have lots of committees. We have a Conservation Strategies Committee that meets every 2 months and looks at our projects and makes recommendations about whether or not we should pursue them, among others. We have a Finance Committee, but I don't think any HR and government. But anyway, so if you want to know more, that's a good way to go.
Let's give Sandy one more round of applause. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun. And again, I'm sorry Deja wasn't here. I think would have had a lot more fun. But anyway, there's our contact information, and I'll be sticking around. Thanks.
Thanks for coming out, everybody. We'll see you again next week. The month of February is going to be really exciting. We've got a fantastic slate of guests coming in to help us celebrate Black History Month. So make sure you're here every Wednesday at noon all through the month of February. We're going to have a great time. Bye, everybody.